listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. You know, the key to everything is literacy. The key to everything is being able to read. And, you know, I'm also a person, well, we won't talk about math today, but math is like another language too. So getting those basics, reading, math, and writing, getting those basics are really important. My friend Jeanne Seaver, and I have worked on a lot of issues together over the years, and she is now on the new Georgia Literacy Council, and they're going to be meeting at Lanier Tech today, and so we wanted to have her on to talk about literacy. Jeanne, how are you?
Good morning, Martha. I'm great. It's good to see you or hear from you.
Yeah, so listen, tell me, first of all, about the Literacy Council. Explain to people what it is, and then what the goals are and how, you know, this path is going to be better for Georgia school children.
So first of all, I just want to make sure that I am not speaking on behalf of the Georgia Literacy Council. I am speaking on behalf of myself and what I'm learning as a member of the council, that I was actually nominated by Speaker John Burns. And basically, one of the reasons that I was appointed was because that I had dyslexia at a very, very young age. So I learned how difficult it can be to read and thought it would be a great asset to the council. But it all started, we're failing in reading. Our kids aren't learning to read, so our legislators passed some legislation, I think it was 2 years ago, on trying to really focus on literacy, because if you can't read, you can't be successful in anything you do. Everybody's got to learn to read. So we've been working and meeting monthly or quarterly. We've got working groups on specific topics on how to make it better and how to get all of our kids reading again and loving to read and understand that reading is the key and the goal to any success that you can be whatever you want to be as long as you know how to read.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's just, you hit the nail on the head on that loving to read, you know, because I, as a child, reading was really important to me, and I found that I could kind of go into a book. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd read a book and I would lose all track of time because I was so immersed in the book and the story, and it made me want to read more. And I was lucky that way. Reading came easy for me, and because my parents weren't that well educated. My father was a high school dropout who took a few college classes after he got out of the Army, but my mother only finished high school. But they had a love of learning, and they instilled that on us. And I think that they understood that we had to learn how to read. Really, we had to get a good education so that we could do better than they did. That was their whole goal. And I think that's the way most parents are. But it's so important to be able to read, because if that kid gets a bad relationship with reading, it can follow them all the way through school.
Absolutely. And so some of the focuses that Georgia wants to be the leader in the nation for literacy, that we want every child to be able to read by the third grade. We want to make sure, which has been a problem in the past, which you're so much very aware of, is the fact that a lot of our educators don't understand how to teach the science of reading. So that is another key focus, that we listen a lot to our teachers. We have some teachers on the council that can give us feedback and make sure that our teachers understand and are required to know how to teach the science of reading. And then the third goal really is making sure that the community and our parents understand and have access to the resources that are available to them to help, because a lot of the parents have literacy problems themselves. So we definitely need to focus on, all of those specific topics, and we're really excited about the push. We just need to get things moving and get things forward. So a lot of things are being implemented in 24 about having the coaches in each district, having literacy coaches, having dyslexia tests done for all of our children. So it's like, I've always been, Martha knowing me, I've always been a girl on the prevention side. Let's go and try to get the problems early and then, focus on that and go ahead and move forward so we can get our kids reading easily and loving it at the same time.
So let's shift gears, too, because I know one of the other things that you worked on very hard over the last couple of legislative sessions is working against the expansion of gambling in Georgia. And how does that look? Because we're, in a hop, skip, and a jump, we're going to be in the legislative session again, just kind of shifting gears and putting on a different hat. How does that look for this next session?
Well, there's no doubt Senator Summers is already advocating from the Senate, sending out emails to every person, every elected official on the state, local level, and city level, pushing it, saying that the outcome of the misleading question on the ballot, that they're saying that a majority of Republican voters think that that's the best for Georgia. But it's so misleading the way that it's being produced. But so it'll definitely be coming out, and we will be fighting it again. I mean, you can read studies after studies, Martha. You can hear stories after stories of how gambling is impacting. It's destroying sports, for one. It preys on the poor, for two. And it targets our kids on their iPhones and video games. And my organization, Moms Against Gambling, along with Faith and Freedom, Frontline Policy, Mike Griffin and the Baptist engagement that he's involved with, and many other organizations are going to continue to fight it. And the most important thing we can do is just to build awareness, because, Martha, you know me better than most. I'm not about telling people what we can do and what we can't do constitutionally. I'm a big supporter of our Constitution, and the big talking point, it's even getting away from the children's education, which was what it was for before, which didn't work and failed. But the bottom line is we're there's child trafficking going on out there. Because you always hear it, we're already doing it. There's child trafficking going out there. Does that make it okay? There's drug and fentanyl hitting our kids. It's happening out there already. Is that okay? No, and gambling is the same. I mean, it's just the same outcome. It just destroys family and mental health services. Martha, you know how that's growing, the needs for mental health services. Well, this gambling, the addictions from gambling will go sky high. And bottom line, Georgia will end up paying more for mental health services than they will on the revenues they collect from gambling.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I have been able to argue this position from both sides. Okay, I have been, but I'm leaning more towards you this year, Jeannie, because I've done the research you've asked me to do. I've looked into it. I've looked at the resources, and first of all, I just think there are more important things we could be focusing on right now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I don't think that this is one of those things. For me personally, I would like to see us get back to where you have to have a doctor's visit for the abortion pill cocktail because of the complications that are involved. That's a personal thing for me. I would like to do that. But there are more important things that we can do. And Jeanne Seaver, we'll talk to you all during the legislative session. Have a great meeting, and I appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you so much, Martha. You have a great day.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Bill Crane is here with me for Crane's Corner. I mean, this case has been an eye-opener, Bill. I mean, the testimony has been graphic at times, and, I find it gut-wrenching, and I'm just sorry he's not going to get the death penalty.
Well, as I understand it, and I'm watching it, the coverage in the Athens news media market, her head was bashed in, among other things, and photographs that it's not a jury trial, that the judge has seen that are being presented in court are of a pretty graphic murder. So, assuming that the prosecutor has the case and the defense attorney is incorrect and he's convicted, I also expect he'll be one of the first people that President-elect Donald Trump deports out of the country.
Yeah.
We may not see him serve his time here in the United States.
Yeah. And I think, too, the 10th count, which was the peeping Tom stuff, from what I understand, talking to lawyers, is that meant he was looking for someone to kill or to commit a crime against, which would have fit him into a death penalty had Deborah Gonzalez seen fit to do so. But the good news is she lost in her election, so justice does win out sometimes.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by not only the win in Oconee County, but the margin in Clark County. Ms. Gonzalez also served in the Georgia General Assembly, and she is more of an activist than she is an attorney or an advocate for the prosecution and the people that she's sworn in to serve and protect. I don't bear her any ill will, but I think the Western Judicial Circuit just got an upgrade. So
what is your take? There's a big brouhaha right now in the Georgia Democratic Party. I mean, look, bottom line is Nikema Williams should have never been the chair of the party and a sitting congresswoman. That wasn't, anybody could have seen that at some point in time that wasn't going to work. And it was manifested in the poor performance that they had in this election. But, you know, Senator Ossoff was betrayed by people around, maybe not around him, but around her, because he tried to be the guy that made a phone call and said, hey, this needs to happen. How can we make this happen? And Nikema
now it looks like he's a white guy pushing out a black woman.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes.
I think it's unfortunate the way it's playing out. I've watched both Georgia's GOP and the Democratic
I heard someone call him skinny white guy pushing out a black woman.
Well, he is thin. He is thin. I've heard people in both the Republican and Democratic Party over the years commenting that party chairmanship is a full-time job. The reality of the bases of the parties are different. And so where someone like Alec Ponovit, who's an agribusinessman and very successful and served multiple years as chair of the Republican Party, can do his job and run multiple businesses and run the party. The makeup and the structural way that Democrats turn out voters is different. And I think it may require a full-time person. I don't place the blame of what did and didn't happen in Georgia's elections on Congresswoman Nikema Williams, and that played out nationally. I don't know why, but Democrats seem unable to place any blame on either the DNC or Vice President Harris or her campaign. There was a poll released of Democrats this week looking already ahead to 4 years from now in 2028, and their top choice for the Democratic nominee, 41%, Vice President Harris. I'm not saying she's a bad person, but I think she ran tactically a very flawed campaign. But there seems to be a lot of finger-pointing, and my column is on that this week. I'm calling it Stop the Squeal, moaning and complaining and scapegoating. And, if I were advising the Democratic Party, I'd be doing focus groups and asking some of those blocks of voters that you lost or that were cracked open for you, what are your issues? Where did we go wrong? And how do we regain your trust? Because I do think some of it's simply broken trust.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And I think the number is roughly around 40,000 people that left it blank this time, which is up from 2020. So, I'm very interested to see what that number is nationwide because, you've got now Kamala Harris is about 8 million votes below what Joe Biden got. And Trump was only about 1 million more than what he got the last time. So it's very interesting to see how this will all play out. One final question I want to talk to you about, or one final issue I want to talk to you about, is the governor came out yesterday and said, we need more money for Hurricane Helene recovery. Also, the just debacle that's continuing to go on in Western Carolina, where the FEMA people have a fenced-in area with heating and air conditioning and 3 meals a day, and the people around them have nothing. A good story that came out of there is the National Christmas Tree is coming out of a Christmas tree farm from Western Carolina that did not have enough damage to wipe out their whole crop of Christmas trees, which at least that's a good thing, right? So, but it's just amazing to me. I mean, the FEMA will provide for themselves, but they don't provide for the people they're supposed to be providing for.
I think back to the broken trust thing, the way that disaster recovery was handled in North Carolina, South Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, and they got hit twice in Central Florida, contributed to the losses of the Biden administration, which is the Harris administration, the potential Kerry Ford Harris administration, in these natural disasters. I mean, there are some structural things the president could have done, calling Congress back into session for additional emergency funding. He did not. And, you know, we've heard about the Florida administrator telling FEMA workers not to give money to people with Donald Trump yard signs or that were evidently Donald Trump supporters. Just this is what gives rise to the discussion to gut the federal employee workforce, and I hope it doesn't happen at the level they're looking at, $2 trillion. But there's a lot of fat, and FEMA's, I won't say they got one job, but their mission critical is when a disaster strikes, you get in there and you get in there fast. And I do not understand having employees in air-conditioned trailers or tents and still having families and children out on the streets.
Well, and I do think it's fair to say I've seen a couple of interviews with the woman who was fired, and, you know, she makes a good point. She says, I was merely taking notes from group meetings we were having, and I passed them along. I shouldn't be the only one to be going down here, basically, is what she's saying, that this was directives that she got. Now, maybe that they didn't say in their policy Trump signs, but somewhere in a meeting, somebody said Trump signs, okay? And really, in a hurricane, how do you know the Trump sign's in front of the right house? So if you pass by a house with a Trump sign...
It's irrelevant to the question of need.
Yes, it's irrelevant. Yes. It's crazy, isn't it? So... Anyway.
I am glad to see, and we're not done, obviously. We're in the apprentice version of cabinet appointments now, but I'm glad that this election is in the rear view, and I do hope, given the election mandate and the percentage of the popular vote that's shrinking but still in Donald Trump's favor, that we can all start to look forward and focusing more on what we have in common versus what we have that's different.
So what are your thoughts on the cabinet picks?
Some of them are really good, makes sense to me, like Marco Rubio, but some of them, because, like RFK as an example, I think he deserves a significant appointment for his involvement in the campaign, and I would put him at the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, where he has some expertise as an attorney suing large corporations for the ingredients they put, particularly in children's food and products. But I don't know that he's not medically trained, and putting him in as HHS secretary, I think, is a reach. So, and I don't think you and I will disagree at all about the inappropriateness of Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General. So I think part of this is Mr. Trump, the President-elect, testing the U.S. Senate on how quickly they're going to bend to his will. And part of this is just him. He likes being cussed and discussed. And we may remember when Nikki Haley resigned as United Nations ambassador for about 2 days, there was discussion of his daughter Ivanka Trump for that job. It faded, and I think he was probably doing the trial balloon just to see kind of how much she could stir up. But we're seeing now Laura Trump being discussed to replace Marco Rubio in the U.S. Senate. So there's going to be a lot of things that are floated that are just to be evocative and discussed, with probably even awareness in the Trump closest circles that not all those folks are going to make it through.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you that he wants to see how far he can get with the Senate. And the Senate, because they picked John Thune, which I believe they picked because he could not only keep the Republican caucus together, he might be able to, in tough votes, bring a few 3, 4, 5, 6 Democrats that are in red states along with them, too, to get things done. I mean, I think that because that's a real issue. There's a number of those Democrats that are in red states. And
John Thune is Mitch McConnell's majority whip, ousted South Dakota Senator Tom Daschle, and helped flip the party back in power at an earlier time. In his 4th term, and there's nowhere that's revered more to have seniority in the U.S. Senate. He's the better pick.
Yeah. I thought he was a better pick, too, but I've known Rick Scott for 20 years, and, he was tough and good on issues. even before he was a Trump supporter. So I think he got a little unfair treatment there. But at the same time, I'm fine with John Thune. I think he did a good job, and I think he'll keep working on it. So, Bill Crane, I appreciate you being with us today. Thank you so much.
Take care, Martha.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
We're here with Chandelle Summer, and I always love to talk about legal cases when Chandelle's here. So I threw in the Jussie Smollett overturning. Tell us about that one.
So, as you will recall, when he was first charged, he entered into a plea bargain with the state's attorney, and they agreed to give him sort of a fine and have him do some community service, and the charges would go away. And then they brought in a special, I'm not sure why, but they brought in a new attorney to take the place of the district attorney, a special assistant attorney general, who said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and prosecute him. They had a trial. He was convicted. I think he got 5 months to serve, did actually 6 days before he got out on appeal. And his grounds for appeal was, look, I made a deal. We both agreed to it. And now you're saying you're going to undo the deal, which really undoes the whole system of criminal defense, which is basically a situation where anybody who's charged with a crime, their attorney or the person themselves goes to the state's attorney, the district attorney, and says, I want to enter into a plea bargain. If you'll, let me plead guilty to these charges and give me this sentence, then in fact, I will go ahead and plead guilty and get this case off your docket. If the system didn't work like that, quite frankly, it would fall apart because there are so many thousands of cases, and the system is really only designed to try about 30 to 40 a year. So they have to deal with the person who's charged or their attorney. And so they're saying basically here, if you make a deal, you're stuck with it. You have to honor it. It's due process to not honor the deal that you made. So I thought that was a big win for criminal defense attorneys everywhere. The law in Georgia, I don't know if it supports that. I've never really had a situation where somebody's, reneged on a deal like that. Now, the defendant can walk away at any time until they enter their plea of guilty. They can agree to something and then get up there and change their mind. And the judge doesn't have to accept the deal. The deal is put up by the judge.
We saw that with Hunter Biden. We saw that with the Hunter Biden thing.
Well, they got into it about some details about what the immunity meant.
So, if I understand what you're saying correctly, it's that basically it was a technicality because you had this one prosecutor that made the deal, and then a new prosecutor comes in and says, no, we're not going to do the deal, and that was not fair to the defendant.
That's correct.
Basically, is what you're saying.
It was a due process violation. They said that is not the process that's due.
And you know what? I think that's fair. I mean, while I think what Jussie Smollett did was a horrible thing, okay, because what he did was hired somebody to make it look like it was some racial thing, and it wasn't, okay? That's not a good thing. But technically nobody was really hurt, but resources were used. I think, wasn't that the big issue, that these big resources were used to try to follow up on his story? Is that?
Yes, he had to pay restitution to the state of Illinois, I believe, in the amount of $110,000 or something like that, for all the resources they spent trying to find the people who did it. And then, of course, in the second trial, the people that he hired to do it came in and testified that he had hired them to create this scenario where he was supposedly beaten because he was a black guy, and it was some MAGA.
They were married. MAGA hats.
Yeah, they were wearing MAGA hats. And so, that's a terrible thing to do. We don't need any more dissension in the country, and we certainly don't need fake crimes made up to sort of rev up the base. But it's not, like you said, no one was hurt. And that happens more often than you would think. It's usually in sort of more situations that involve relationships between people, marriages, girlfriend, boyfriend. You get a lot of made-up stories in those kinds of circumstances. And oftentimes they get prosecuted if the stories don't hold weight.
And MSNBC is in a lot of hot water for using the headline, Laken Riley's killer never stood a chance. That just was pretty awful to me that he put that there.
Well, that's probably true because his attorneys waived a jury trial.
Well, that's true, but just not. It's not a smart headline. okay? Because Laken Riley never stood a chance. Okay, she got murdered by this guy. That's all the point is. It's not a very thoughtful.
It might not have
headline.
been very sensitive, but quite frankly, when they waived the jury trial and decided to have the case presented to the judge only, that pretty much tells you everything you need to know. They didn't think
they knew they were going to lose.
Yeah, they didn't think there was any really contestable issues, and in fact, there weren't. I mean, it was an incredibly strong circumstantial case. They had his DNA under her fingernails. He had been taking selfies earlier in the day where he was wearing the same clothes that he dumped in the dumpster later. He was seen on surveillance cameras, kind of stalking around the area right before she ran by. Her blood was on his jacket. Gloves that he was supposedly wearing were found. A set that matched them was found in his apartment. His cell phone had, like I said, the selfies. Her cell phone had his fingerprints on it. And so, there was just not much of a chance for an acquittal. And that was underscored by the fact that they waived the right to put it in front of a jury, where, you might find one person who's sort of a holdout and just decides they don't want to convict him, especially in a town like Athens, which is known for sort of more of a liberal bent. But I think that, it was terribly heartbreaking testimony, and especially when they read the series of text messages from the mother and Laken Riley and her mother, and where her mother was trying frantically to get in touch with her, sensing something was wrong, and Laken never called her back. But it's just, I think it's the shocking nature of this, that in broad daylight, you're in a town like Athens, Georgia, doing something, running on a well-traveled route, and you have this horrible predator who is violent and takes advantage of the situation and killed her. So,
and you pointed out last week that peeping Tom count was important. Even though they didn't seek the death penalty, it could have been grounds to seek the death penalty. And I thought it was it's kind of like a case of technology, right? Where you've got the DNA evidence, which was in multiple places. You've got multiple cameras showing her on her run, as well as him disposing clothes, all of that sort of thing that's going on. And then you've got, text messages, and the fact she and her roommates always shared their locations, so that when she had gone out for the run, it was fairly quick when they noticed, hey, she hadn't gotten back yet, that kind of thing, which is a new kind of thing. I mean, in the old days, before we had all of this, you might go off to class, and your roommate went off for a run, and you might not be getting back till 4 PM, so nobody would have missed her until 4 PM.
You're absolutely right, Martha. It is a coming-of-age case. And another very important technological aspect of this case was the fact that she had on a running watch. You can time your runs and your heart rate and that type of thing. And so they were able to pinpoint the exact minute when her heart rate went from, I think, 170 down to 0, which is when she died, right? So that was on her Garmin data. And so even that was just so unusual that we have all of this technology
and
now.
It was able to show that she struggled for 18 minutes, so that there was some kind of struggle that was going on for 18 minutes. You had the 911 call, which I guess there's this one button, call 911 if you're in an emergency. So the call went through, but she wasn't able to speak, and it goes on for almost a minute before you hear "Yo Tango," as what Ibarra said. And then I listened mistakenly. I should have never done it. I listened to the witness statements, the victim witness impact statements.
Victim impact statements.
Yeah, and I was bawling. I mean, it was so gut-wrenching, because you imagine yourself, if you're a parent, if you're a friend, if you're whatever, you imagine yourself in this situation, because you always feel, if you're a decent human being, you feel like the girl who happened to not be in Athens that day that used to run with her on a regular basis. Oh, my God, if I had been there, then she would have had somebody to run with. I mean, it's natural, if you're a normal human being, right, to say, if I had done this, this wouldn't have happened. But the truth of the matter is, the only person that had control over this was Jose Ibarra.
Right.
He decided to go out and hunt a woman that day, and who knows how many women were avoiding this. You know what I mean? Because he might have gone out looking for women before. But in this case, it was horrible.
It's a terribly frightening scenario. And especially if you have a child and you're worried about them all the time, and you're trying to get in touch with them on the cell phone and they don't answer, and then immediately your mind goes to, what's wrong? Where is she? Why is she not answering her cell phone? And that kind of thing. So I think it was shocking, and I'm happy that it was assigned to Judge Haggard, who I know is a very conservative and seasoned jurist, and he certainly didn't have any hesitation finding him guilty, sentencing him to life without parole. But I think probably, you could have had anybody up there and that you would have gotten the same result, because, like I said, they sort of, by waiving a jury trial, that was pretty much an admission that there was nothing factually that they were going to contest. They did have some resistance to the DNA and the fingerprint evidence, but even that is so well documented these days, and it's used in so many cases that there's rarely a challenge to the scientific reliability of that type of evidence anymore. I mean, it has to be a very unique circumstance.
Yeah, it's a long way from O.J. Simpson, right? Where
the early 90s
challenged everything.
Right. Yeah. In the early 90s, there was still a lot of doubt about DNA, and the collection techniques were often challenged, and sometimes successfully, but not anymore. It's pretty much a given.
So the two questions I'm getting the most from listeners on this is, one, should he serve his sentence here or should he be deported? And my gut is I'd rather him serve it here, because I know he's more likely to serve it here than if he's deported.
Yes.
Yeah.
You do not want him deported, where he can just cross the border again and he'll be in the United States illegally, possibly. But it's not going to deter him, of course, from leading a life of crime. You want him held in prison in the United States for the rest of his life. And I think that's what will happen.
And then Scott in Gainesville said, in regards to the Lakem Riley case, I feel Ibarra should be moved to a federal prison. State taxpayers should not be responsible for his upkeep the rest of his life. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think that that's possible. There's a lot of things people said, like, why didn't they seek the death penalty? Because this is a case where the death penalty...
Deborah Gonzalez is why they didn't seek the death penalty.
That's right. Deborah Gonzalez had to elect whether she was going to seek the death penalty early on, and she didn't. And a lot of people are criticizing Chris Carr, saying he should have stepped in and taken over the case and gone for the death penalty, but he didn't even have the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction, or the power to determine whether or not you seek the death penalty, is solely in the discretion of the local district attorney. The state can't come in and overrule you. And
a local state senator, Colton Moore, who has a lot of problems himself, has said that Chris Carr could intervene and get the death penalty for him. That is not true, right?
Colton Moore needs to go to law school.
Okay.
That's not possible. Chris Carr doesn't have the jurisdiction to do that. Now, once the death penalty is imposed, the Attorney General for the state of Georgia has jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is just a fancy word for power. He has the power to handle the case at that point. The AG's office handles death penalty appeals, but not death penalty prosecutions.
Yes. And he, of course, announced for governor yesterday, and it is interesting that would be the response. Can't he do something about Lakem Riley? Well, unfortunately, no. Deborah Gonzalez is going to pay for this decision, because she had someone run against her and got defeated in November, because even in liberal Athens, people were so horrified that this guy didn't get the death penalty that a lot of Democrats voted against her.
And quite frankly, the dirty little secret within the legal community was that she was highly unpopular for reasons other than this case, that she was unorganized, that her office was understaffed because nobody wanted to work for her, because she was difficult to work for. So she at one point had 8 positions open out of an office of 10 and couldn't find anybody to fill them.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.